Hi Krista, I'm in a bit of a hurry today, so I'm going to try and make my video really quick. I just want to talk a little bit about the size of Canada because I can't seem to get it out of my head. So, Canada is kind of theoretically infinite. I mean, the figure for the area I gave was pretty accurate. There was kind of lackadaisical in his approach to topography, but besides that, it represents roughly the area of Canada as a two-dimensional projection of a three-dimensional Canada. But when you account for topography, the figure is probably somewhat higher. But then there's much more complicated things, like consider the area of a hairbrush, right? It's a fairly small thing, but there are probably some in Canada. And the thing is, each little fiber of the hairbrush, that has a lot of area on it. So if we look on a very small scale, the area of Canada is substantially larger. So every carpet in Toronto, every wheat field in Manitoba, every apartment building, all of these things are increasing the area locally by a factor of 10 to a factor of 100,000. Like, some things are quite bristly, and those things really increase the area, and when we consider on a smaller scale, the area increases even more. It's very counterintuitive, but as we consider every pore on every Canadian face, that pore increases the area of the face even more, and every hair on the person's head has a great deal of surface area, and that, in the previous model, was considered just maybe a square foot, maybe a square meter. So just as an example, the Great Bear Lake is the largest lake in Canada. It has an island in it, that has a lake in it, that has an island in it, but that's not what we're here to talk about. It has an approximate area of 3.1 times 10 to the 10 meters squared. So if we consider the surface area of all of the water molecules on the surface of that lake, if we use the accessible surface area algorithm to determine their surface area and then halve it, because you figure only about half of the surface area of the water molecules is pointing up, well then that area increases by a factor of 2.5. That's without considering, you know, the surface area of every tree and moss growing on the island in the center of that lake, and assuming that the lake is pure distilled water, which it fucking isn't, but that's so not the point. The point is that as we consider smaller surfaces, their areas increase. Things get sort of knobbly and wavy, and, well, it gets really complicated. So this might be easier to understand in two dimensions, right? So you got this line here, which is, you know, has a relatively small length, but this line, which might be approximated the same on the map, right, similar length overall, has a much greater length if you consider its extended length, if you considered every crevice. And then if you consider, you know, the molecules which make up the ink that make up the line, well, all of their, the ones on the edges, all of their lengths are much longer. So as we consider greater detail about the border of Canada, the length of that border increases exponentially. So, as we understand almost anything in a more nuanced way, it becomes more difficult to quantify, and the quantitative measures cease to make as much sense, and we must approximate more. But that's okay. That doesn't mean we don't understand how big Canada is. It just means that a nuanced understanding involves understanding the limits of that knowledge, the scale at which that way of modeling Canada's size is appropriate. I think it's possible that I'm not doing math anymore, and in fact have just become a little bit unhinged. Krista, I will see you tomorrow, and do make a video tomorrow.